With the lockdowns and everything that came in the wake of the coronavirus, most of this discussion that would probably take place at academic conferences or take place in public events and venues has been thrust into exactly what we're doing now. It's Zoom meetings or Twitter feuds, Twitter debates, and what we've seen over the past 7 months is really the discussion over the 1619 project, which was awarded a Pulitzer Prize right at the outset of the pandemic, has almost entirely taken place now online. So I entered that over a year ago when the original 1619 project issue came out of the New York Times as a critic, but a measured critic. I'd even go far as to say I was more charitable to it than many of the opponents of the project, but nonetheless pointed out historical errors in the main areas that I worked on and have published on as a scholar, and that is the economics of slavery. So I wrote several successive critiques of the main essay on the economics of slavery, which was written by Matthew Desmond, a sociologist, and then also some critiques, but also partial defenses of claims made in the lead essay to the project, and that was by Nicole Hannah-Jones, who was also the reporter that basically took the charge of creating the 1619 project. That played out for a couple months of back and forth. It became clear by the end of last year that historians were from across the political spectrum were reading this thing, and they were clearly finding problems with both its factual analysis and its interpretation of the past. In particular, it had advanced a kind of a fringe theory of the American Revolution that asserted it was to protect and defend slavery against the British Empire, which I think is utter nonsense, but based on a misreading and an overstatement of evidence. Then the second thing, which I really focused on, was its assertion that capitalism, free market capitalism today, is some sort of a derivative of the slave plantation system of the 19th century, which is a really aggressively argued view on the far left side of academia and the political spectrum, but it's something that economic historians have largely rejected. And yet the
Yes.
1619 project's primarily based on that.
So on the first charge that the Revolutionary War was fought to protect slavery. When did England get rid of slavery? Well, when did they do away with it?
Right. It's not for another 50 years after the American Revolution.
Yeah.
So it's kind of an absurdity that's at odds with the timeline itself to assert that England is an emerging kind of abolitionist power in 1775, 1776.
Hmm.
Because what's really going on in Great Britain is there is an internal debate over slavery. So there are abolitionists in England proper, just as there are abolitionists in the United States. But it's not abolitionist England versus pro-slavery United States at all in that time.
Yeah, and I wonder if so much of that has to do with I think it almost seems like the way that slavery is taught in the United States. It seems like students can walk away thinking that slavery is almost an American invention,
Right.
that it wasn't happening, forever, and also in other parts of the world.
Yeah, it's treated, especially in the 1619 project, it's treated as almost if it's America's original sin. And there was even some controversy over that. They picked 1619. It's the date that the first slave ship arrives off the coast of Jamestown, Virginia, the English colony. But slavery had already been imported into North America almost a century prior by the Spanish colonies. When Spain, at this time controlled what's now the state of Florida. Spain had vast presences on both the North American continent and South American continent that were connected to slavery. So it's not like a uniquely American historical event, although the emphasis does tend to play it up as if it's the United States' original sin, whereas everywhere else is kind of either politely overlooked or shoved aside.